I'm a chud, I'm a chud, I'm a fat little chud. Chat, Sonic the Hedgehog Crossworlds is like the best racing game ever. Like earlier we got the announcement of Godzilla and Evangelion joining Crossworlds. Evangelion! That's crazy! Do you know what happens in Evangelion? Let's just say masturbating to a naked 14-year-old girl in a hospital bed is now canon in Sonic the Hedgehog. But jokes aside, I'm really excited for this because Evangelion was a big inspiration for Sonic Frontiers obviously, so seeing that come full circle and having Sonic collab with Eva itself is awesome. And I always found that Sonic was a perfect candidate for a Godzilla crossover, mainly because Sonic and Godzilla both represent forces of nature. While Sonic is like a good force of nature, Godzilla is an evil force of nature. Or also a good force of nature depending on the canon, but you know, they're both forces of nature, which is really cool. And while Crossworlds and Sonic Rumble doesn't have a story element to highlight that aspect of those two characters, at least we're getting the comic crossovers next month. But with these reveals, there are 4 more DLC slots, and I want to go over which franchises I personally want to be added to Crossworlds. Now with this list, I'll be considering what franchises I'm into, plus what is realistically possible. I'm not gonna be like, I hope Sonic Crossworlds adds Project Hail Mary or Chainsaw Man into it. That makes absolutely no sense. So let's go in order from the ones I want the least to the ones I want the most. And honestly, this one was really hard to decide on, mainly because I ran out of crossovers that made sense. But I want to make sure there was a healthy balance between film/TV and video games, so I chose the video game option, which is Monster Hunter. They've already done a Capcom collab with Mega Man, and it fit really well into Crossworlds if they used the Monster Hunter Stories art style. The track could be chasing down a specific monster, probably the Rathalos because it's the most iconic, but I was also thinking maybe the character that you play as wears the Rathalos armor, and then maybe the second character can be another type of armor. Possibly something from the new Monster Hunter DLC they just announced. For the vehicle, maybe they can just turn the Rathalos into a car or something. Or they could do something like Pirate Majima and turn like one of the Monster Hunter sailing boats, flying boats into a car. And maybe there can be a co-op element to the stage where if everyone damages the monster enough, everyone gets a reward. Maybe they get a shield applied to them automatically. Okay, on to the next DLC. I hope to see Star Wars. It just makes so much sense. Sonic has taken so much inspiration from Star Wars, and he was in both Wreck-It Ralph movies, so Sega have collaborated with Disney before. In fact, they had Wreck-It Ralph and Sonic and All-Stars Racing transformed. This track is going to be awesome because it'll be focusing on flight, but it's also so difficult to pick what I want in the track because there's so much Star Wars history. I guess we could have Anakin Skywalker and Darth Vader as 2 separate characters, even though they're the same guy. And maybe we could explore iconic dogfights from the series, starting with the dogfight at the beginning of Star Wars Episode 3, then we can go through hyperspace and end up in the trench run in Episode 4, before we end up in everyone's favorite, Star Wars Episode 8, where they do the thing where they go into hyperspace and then they hyperspace into all the enemy fleets and then destroy all the ships. I know everyone hates that scene, but that scene actually is not that bad, like honestly. The vehicle could be like a Jedi Starfighter, or X-Wing, or TIE Fighter inspired. And Star Wars needs a W because the Mandalorian and Baby Yoda did really badly. And what would be a bigger win than collabing with Sonic the Hedgehog himself? Nothing! Okay, for my second most anticipated, I would love Lupin the Third as DLC. Please, Sega, please. It makes so much sense. Now, a lot of you may not know what Lupin the Third is, but it's this really old anime series from the 70s. And it's like Japan's equivalent to Scooby-Doo format-wise. Like, it's a different premise, but everything else is pretty much the same. You get the same characters in every season. There's no real continuity, but they might make references to older stuff. I guess, like, if you mashed James Bond and Mission Impossible and Scooby-Doo, that's kind of how I describe it. Lupin and Sonic are similar to Godzilla and Sonic. So Godzilla and Sonic are like a force of nature, Lupin and Sonic both represent freedom. But then you also have Lupin's right-hand man, Daisuke Jigen, who's really good with the guns, and then you could say Tails is Sonic's right-hand man, who's really good with technology. Then we also have Lupin's left-hand man, who's a man out of time, Goemon Ishikawa, a samurai. He isolates himself from modern society, and he was originally a foe to Lupin, before becoming friends with Lupin shortly after. I wonder what Sonic character that's similar to. Both Sonic and Lupin have a consistent archenemy, and both Sonic and Lupin are in a very complicated will they won't they with a girl they like. Sonic and Lupin complement each other like milk and cookies. I have no idea how they haven't crossed over yet. And I've been thinking about making a more in-depth video about it for a while, but just haven't really gotten to it. But outside of franchise similarities, Lupin is technically owned by Sega because Sega owns the animation company that makes the Lupin animes. And Marza Animation Planet, the animation studio that's worked on the Sonic movies and the CGI cutscenes in the Sonic games, they made a full-length Lupin CGI movie. Ideally, we would have Lupin himself as the first playable character, and I don't know who else we would have. We could have Jigen as the right-hand man, but we could also have Fujiko just to balance out the gender ratio of the game. But then we could also have Zenigata, the enemy of Lupin, just to have that, you know, arch nemesis dynamic. I don't know which one I'd go with. The vehicle would be interesting though, because Sega would have to get licensing for a Fiat 500 and then go-kartify it, I guess. The track, I'm actually not too sure. Lupin just travels all over the world, so it doesn't have a really consistent iconic setting. But Castle of Cagliostro is Lupin's most iconic movie because it was directed by Hayao Miyazaki, so maybe that could act as the setting. Or we could just break into a bunch of random buildings and see a compilation of iconic Lupin moments. Whatever they do, just have a Sonic and Lupin crossover movie, please. It just needs to happen. But yeah, that's all I'll say about Lupin until that video I want to make. And finally, the #1 Sonic and Sega crossover I want is Umamusume. This game has just taken over my life. I find it really addicting, and it's also a perfect candidate for a game full of Sega franchises. Wait, how does Umamusume link to Sega? Well, in Umamusume, real-life racehorses from our world are reincarnated into horse girls in the Umamusume world, and some of these horses are owned by prominent Sega figures. Satono Diamond is the main one here. She's owned by Hajime Satomi. I guess he's owned because the real-life horse is a he. And he was the previous chairman of Sega Sammy. His son is the current chairman. But in the game of Umamusume, Satono Diamond is like the daughter of a big CEO kind of character. She's really good at crane games, which is a nod to the Sega UFO catchers. And in one of the game's story modes, her dad creates this VR machine called the Mega Dream Supporter, being a reference to the Mega Drive and the Dreamcast. And this very specific story mode also crosses over with the Sega horse racing game called Star Horse 4. In terms of horses, we also have Satono Crown, which is the sister of Satono Diamond. And we also have Smart Falcon, who in real life is owned by the son of Isao Okawa. Now, Isao Okawa was a chairman at Sega. He died, but before he died, he donated all his Sega stocks back to Sega for free, and that kind of saved Sega from collapsing and imploding on itself because of the Dreamcast's failure. Oh yeah, and Umamusume has already collaborated with Sega's Initial D arcade game, which was made by the same team as Sonic Racing Crossworlds, by the way, just letting you guys know. And with the launch of Umamusume globally last year, it's the perfect time to have Umamusume in Sonic Racing Crossworlds. The obvious main pick for a character should be Satono Diamond because of her ties to Sega, and the second character can be either Special Week or Gold Chip. They're kind of like the face of the game / mascots, so either of them will do. For the vehicle, I have no idea what they can do. I guess they'll just have to go the Ichiban route and design a car with the same motifs as Satono Diamond. The obvious choice for a racetrack is to have just a horse racing field, but that would be really boring. So I guess they should just drive around the school that they go to in Umamusume, Tracing Academy. They could go from like the front of the school with the 3 goddesses statues and then break into the school, drive through the classrooms, and then maybe end out the back in the actual race course. But yeah, as a Sega freak, learning about the connections Umamusume has to Sega was just like such a pleasant surprise. But yeah, that's the objective definitive year 2 list of DLC for Sonic Racing Crossworlds. This is literally the best they could do. They could not do better. Dragon Ball what?